Hi, I'm Shiv Gaglani, welcoming you to Raise the Line with Osmosis from Elsevier, an ongoing exploration about how to improve health and healthcare. Today we're going to learn about one of the nation's newest medical schools in one of its fastest growing states. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Robert Hasty, the Dean and Chief Academic Officer of the Orlando College of Osteopathic Medicine, which has just been granted permission to start accepting applicants for its inaugural class. Dr. Hasty has deep experience building medical educational programs, including serving as the founding dean of the Idaho College of Osteopathic Medicine. In addition to his academic leadership, he has served on various boards, including the American College of Osteopathic Internists and the Association of Osteopathic Directors and Medical Educators. I'm eager to learn what OCOM plans to offer students and what impact it is hoping to have on the residents of Central Florida, myself and my parents having been one of them out in Cape Canaveral. And before we get started, I'd like to thank my colleague Niall Johnston at Elsevier for making the introduction. So, Dr. Hasty, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Shiv. It's a pleasure and honor to be on here. Thank you.
Yeah, and so as we like to ask all of our guests, just in their own words, to give us a sense of their background and their career highlights. For you, I'm very interested in what got you interested in a career in medicine in the first place.
Yeah, so thank you, Shiv. Really appreciate that question. And I was one of those folks that wanted to serve and to help others. And just like most people, I think, that go into medicine. And so when I had the opportunity to become a pre-med back in the day, I did it. And of course, went to medical school. I went to Nova Southeastern University, what's now called Karen Patel College of Osteopathic Medicine. And then I went to Mount Sinai Medical Center for my residency in Miami Beach. So they say that there's actually Mount Sinai in New York, but at Mount Sinai in Miami, we actually call that the real Mount Sinai, but really had the pleasure of being there, and it was a great training experience. And then I also was a hospitalist for the first couple of years of my practice over on the west coast of Florida at Lee Memorial Health Systems, now called Lee Health. And I was in about 2 years, and had the idea of actually going into medical education. So I literally took $100,000 pay cut, and I've been in medical education for the last 18 and a half years or so.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. What kind of got you interested in education? I know part of the job of being a physician is to educate your patients, and, there's a Latin roots, doctore is to teach. But what is your personal story of why you decided to dedicate the last almost 2 decades to education?
Yeah, so I think I really fell in love with teaching as a resident, teaching the medical students that would rotate through. And then I became chief resident and, being involved with the training of, my other, co-residents. And I really kind of fell in love with that. And then when I went into private practice as a hospitalist, I would take medical students on rotations. And there was really just one day, people talk about having epiphanies in their life about doing certain things. I literally, came home from work that day, and I love being a hospitalist. To me, it's the coolest thing in the world. But there was one thing that was cooler, and that was to teach the next generation of physicians. And, so it was almost like a calling. You hear people say that they have religious callings to do certain things. For me, it was the calling to go into medical education. And, the impact that you can make, it's almost a multiplier. The fact that I can, train the future generation of physicians, it's going to have, such a profound effect. And, to this day, that's what gives me purpose in life. I wake up each day and, knowing that, if I can, make a difference in the training of future physicians, I'm going to have such an incredible impact and literally change healthcare for generations to come through, affecting and improving the quality of training of future physicians. So that's why I do what I do, and I love it.
That's awesome. That's obviously comes out very loud and clear from the passion you have for this, and certainly something we at Osmosis can relate to is the multiplier effect you can have by teaching an extra physician or a med student, helping them get in the thousands of patients they'll see over the course of their lifetime and help. So before we go into what you're doing up in Orlando, I wanted to talk a little bit about Idaho too, because it's a program we've come to know. We know Dr. Thomas Moore, we know Dr. Mark Sklivskov. Great program. Would love to hear about what got you to Idaho. It's very different from Miami Beach and other places you've trained. So yeah, tell us about some of the highlights at ICOM.
Yeah, so Idaho, the Idaho College of Osteopathic Medicine, which was Idaho's first and currently only medical school. It was an incredible adventure. And I was, at the time I had left Florida, I was up in North Carolina. I was part of the founding team at Campbell University School of Osteopathic Medicine. And then I got recruited out to be the founding dean of, well, what was initially was going to be in Montana, and we decided to make it in Idaho, the Idaho College of Osteopathic Medicine. And truly, if you look at physician shortage in rural areas, ICOM, or Idaho is sort of the epicenter for, huge rural needs. It's, currently, I think, they rank about 50th in terms of physicians per capita. At the time, I think it was 49th or 48th, something like that, in terms of physicians per capita. And, they had such incredible needs, across every specialty. And there were some logistical challenges. So at the time, they were one of only 5 states without a medical school of its own. They had been served by the University of Washington, and that were trained great graduates, but they had this huge shortage. So it was really God's work to be able to create that school, and again, from the ground up, just being part of a team that had started a new medical school, to be able to do another medical school in a place with huge rural needs and underserved needs from the ground up. It was a great experience. And I'm so proud of ICOM that, the results that they've had, everything from, the quality of the students to the quality of the graduates and their board outcomes, and, the difference it's going to make to so many people there. I'm just so incredibly proud of that. So thank you for asking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So again, you're in Idaho, you've already helped start Campbell, now you've started ICOM, and now Orlando comes up. Can you walk us through kind of the impetus for starting a new medical school in Orlando, and some of the lessons you've learned having started med schools before that you're going to be applying to Orlando, but also what some of the differences may be, because obviously Orlando is a very different place than Idaho or even where Campbell is in North Carolina.
Yeah, absolutely. And, every medical school is unique. The needs of the region and the communities are so incredibly unique. And again, this was a once in a lifetime opportunity. I've been blessed, I've said that a couple of times. I've been blessed with a number of once in a lifetime opportunities. And, I just happened to, I guess, have the skill set and being in the right place at the right time, a number of times now. And this, OCOM, the Orlando College of Osteopathic Medicine, was no different. In fact, it is, to me, I think it's the penultimate opportunity in my career. It's serving Orlando, but it's really serving Central Florida and the entire region with a mission to potentially even have a global impact in what we do here. We want to train very caring and very competent osteopathic physicians who are going to really care for the next generation. And so the whole idea about starting it here in Orlando is that, first of all, Florida is the fastest growing state in the nation. First time in 70 years it's been the case. And also we have a very graying population here in Florida. So you have a lot of different, confounding variables. And when we started doing our analysis, the consultants were saying that we actually needed 4 medical schools in the state of Florida. It looks like we're actually probably going to get them, but with OCOM, we looked at the Central Florida area. Central Florida right now, for the Orlando metropolitan statistical area, it has a population, well, at least back in 2020, about 2.7 million people. It's growing to 5.2 million people in 2030. And so we actually knew it had to be in Central Florida. And then we actually found some property, 25 acres in Horizon West, which is actually right next to Disney. In fact, we're only about 3 miles from Disney World. In fact, we can see the fireworks every night from campus. But really, this is one of the fastest growing areas in Central Florida, literally the epicenter of growth. And so we decided to put it here to, serve the Central Florida region and beyond. And of course, you asked about things I've done differently. I'm one of the few people in the world that have ever started medical school, and I'm certainly one of the few people in the world that's ever started more than one. And you learn a lot through the process. And I can tell you, it's not easier. It actually gets harder because more. And and I think that one of the things I've learned the most is that everything's incredibly connected. So the facility, the curriculum, the people, and more importantly, the culture of the people, the clinical rotation partners, everything, the graduate medical education component, all that stuff is connected and it has to work together. And so I think that that's one of the things that we've done. Of course, we've learned so much stuff about, modern medical education curriculum, and we've developed an incredibly one. And, our goal was really to create the best medical school in the world. We have the funding from Dr. Kiran Patel, who's our founder, who's an incredible entrepreneur physician, and that has given us the funding to do this over $200 million project. And what we're going to do here is just going to be just incredibly special. So I'm so excited, and thanks for great questions, Shiv.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a really exciting opportunity. And before we started the podcast, I know we were joking about the fact that I think part of your pitch to students, not that you need a pitch because there's so much demand to go to med school, is that you're the most magical med school in on the planet, given that you're only 3 miles from Disney. I'm sure that's going to come into play. I don't know if you're going to ever work with Disney in some capacity, but I could imagine the pediatric, like Florida Hospital, I know has a lot of Disney type collaborations. I don't know if they're going to be one of your partners, for example.
Absolutely. We do have a great relationship with, what used to be Florida Hospitals, now Advent Health, and they're incredible people there. And it's funny about, what you said about Disney. Being here in this community, it just becomes part of your DNA almost. And, you made the correlation with Disney. I will tell you, one of my favorite quotes about, Disney, from Walt Disney was that it was never going to be completed. He was talking about Disneyland. It's never going to be completed. It's always going to continuously improve and grow as the world grows. I paraphrase that a little bit, but I love that quote. I've actually, shared that with the team in the past, and we feel the same thing about OCOM. This is the DNA for a medical school that's going to continue to improve and evolve and change over time. And we really, as the founding team, I mean, we're really blessed to be part of it. And I think what we're doing here is very special. So, not to say that take anything away from Disney, but we want to use that as another inspiration for our continued growth and development.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so I mentioned in the introduction that you've been granted permission to start accepting applications for the inaugural class. Can you walk us through a bit about, some of our listeners are pre-meds, so they may be interested in actually applying. Kind of walk us through the timeline for becoming fully functional at OCOM. How many students are you planning on admitting? How many faculty are you hiring? Because also a lot of our audience are faculty and educators probably looking for new opportunities. And again, being able to move to Central Florida as the fastest growing region or fastest growing state is probably a big selling point for them.
Well, first of all, thanks for that. So right now, we've been granted what's called pre-accreditation status, which is basically the step before you get full accreditation, which will, at least in all the schools in the last 100 years, progress on to full accreditation before they graduate their first class. So, and we anticipate to follow a similar route than that. And so we are going to take our first class of 97 students the fall of 2024. So they're starting orientation at the end of July next year. We opened up applications a couple of weeks ago. We've had a robust interest from applicants so far. I think the location helps us a little bit, and hopefully they've learned about our incredibly modern curriculum, our caring culture, and all the other things that we're doing. So hopefully that has attracted people. Right now we have 40 full-time faculty and staff. We're going to be growing to about 71 next summer, and then eventually we get up to about 111 full-time faculty and staff in the facility. But in addition to that, right now we have 950 credentialed clinical preceptors. In fact, we actually listed out on our website, and anybody can go up to ocom.org, our website, and check out all the different specialties. And we certainly will be having a lot of opportunities for those folks as well. So yeah, opportunities for students, and potentially opportunities for folks if they do want to become full-time faculty members, and certainly opportunities for folks if they want to be clinical preceptors when our students go off to third and fourth year rotations. And I think that location aside, and of course the incredible building that we're building, which is, kind of a work of art by itself. But I think, the more important, the experience that the faculty, the staff, the students, I think are going to get is going to be excellent. And we've really designed this from the ground up to be an excellent experience for everyone. And so I'm most excited about the experience that folks will have.
Yeah, no, clearly it sounds like you guys are keeping that top of mind. And, we had one of our previous Raise Line guests was Brigham Willis, who helped start the new University of Texas school in Tyler in rural Texas. And one of their mandates was to hopefully recruit from the community, keep them in the community, and then partner with the community, as well as focus on social determinants of health. Like in their case, they had like a kitchen that they were using to teach medical professionals and students about the importance of nutrition and healthcare. I'm just curious too, are there like things that you're specifically very interested in doing at OCOM, whether it's recruiting from Orlando or Central Florida to keep people in place, or it's, particular curricular innovations that you're most excited about?
Yeah. Well, first of all the above. So, our mission statement does include Central Florida, but we actually go out to potentially have a global impact, within our mission. So I think that, we do definitely want to serve the community and give opportunities for, folks in Central Florida, but we're also going to give folks opportunities from all over. So I think that that's important, and it's also part of the culture of Florida. Historically, people come from all over with this vision of having the American dream here in the Sunshine State. And to me, I think that's one of the things that has made Florida such an incredible state. The differences and the diversity that we have make us stronger as a state and as a region. So we're excited about that. And yes, we are incredibly excited about the curriculum. We were able to start from the ground up with a brand new, fresh curriculum that's has a lot of elements that have been proven other places. So I would say that if anything, we're probably the most evidence-based type of a curriculum, not, obviously evidence-based medicine, but, we've tried to take those elements that have been proven other places to work, and certainly using the evidence-based learning, strategies when we develop the curriculum, but really to try to take away, a lot of the barriers. So, and some of the things we are going to have a lot of active learning, less passive learning. So, I think that we're going to have very, very little mandatory in-person sessions. Some people say it's a lectureless curriculum, although I think that's a little bit of a misnomer because, even though I guess some people would say that we'd have a lectureless curriculum, people are still going to watch videos at home and stuff that are essentially pre-recorded lectures. But, a lot of case-based learning, a lot of simulation is very important for us. Laboratories, virtual anatomy experiences, research integrated with the curriculum, all these things are part of it. Of course, osteopathic manipulative medicine is also integrated in the curriculum as well. So I think all of those, but I look at the curriculum all the time like, man, I wish I could go back and do medical school at OCOM. I'm so excited about it. And of course, we have such an incredible team, that are just going to be great for the student experiences, I think.
Yeah, you're speaking our language through and through with active learning and everything from, flipped classroom, pre-recorded lectures, videos to, simulation. And again, the person who introduced us, Niall, started Complete Anatomy, which is, virtual anatomy. And so as you may know, I've gone back to medical school, but now with the benefit of being able to use these tools, including Osmosis. And I sense in your voice too, like this desire to actually go back and, go through school yourself because you're designing the exact kind of product or training program that you wish you had. Similarly, that's essentially my story as well.
Love it. Yeah, and what a difference Osmosis has made, right? That's been an incredible product that's really helped make such a difference for so many learners. And Complete Anatomy, it's interesting. When we look at everybody's gone, or at least a lot of people have moved towards virtual anatomy, if not have gone all in. We're going to be all in with virtual anatomy, just like Europe is, predominantly all in with virtual anatomy. But it's so funny. I go across labs across the country, and I've seen a lot of different virtual anatomy, curricula or hybrid curricula and things like that. And I see maybe some VR sets, somewhere or something like that. And I ask what they're actually using in their classroom. Almost all of them are using Complete Anatomy on their iPad. So certainly we'll be using Complete Anatomy for our curriculum as well.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I know Niall and the team have done a great job partnering too with Apple. So we have a lot of stuff with the Vision Quest is coming out. And so that's going to be very exciting to see where that goes, which actually leads me to my next question, which is, your first students began in 2024, meaning that, presumably they'll be in residency by 2028, 2029 and fully practicing in the 2030s. And so, as the Wayne Gretzky often said, is, skate where the puck is, you go to where the puck is going. In your opinion, where's the puck going as far as healthcare? What type of physicians, or as we say at Elsevier, clinicians of the future, are you trying to train? And how do things like artificial intelligence play into that?
Yeah. So excellent question. And it's interesting, where we've, come from, because sometimes that tells us, where we're going. But, years ago, medical education was all about bedside manner and that. And then we went into this huge phase where we had this explosion in the science, behind medicine. And now a lot of the new innovations are really based upon, the delivery of medicine and how medicine's being, delivered, and, questions answered and those type of things, including, as you mentioned, artificial intelligence, and including, telehealth and those type of things. But it's interesting, right now, I think one of the most important aspects is some of the basics, communication, interpersonal skills, systems-based practice, making sure that people know how to practice within their system and also within learning within the practice and those type of things. So I think that by training folks that are well suited with all those skills, we're gonna create physicians who are going to be prepared to take on anything that comes along, and to harness those tools like the artificial intelligence. How can they improve better care for their patients, using some of these technologies like artificial intelligence. You mentioned the Apple Vision Pro. I just talked to one of our good friends who runs a telehealth company. He has 24/7. He has doctors across that are taking care of patients across the world from a telehealth standpoint, and we're talking about incorporating some of those technologies and information in the curriculum. It's just things that you couldn't even fathom 20, 30 years ago that is a reality now. So but again, it goes back to that core thing. We're going to have caring physicians that we're going to train who are going to embrace the world and what's available to them, and that they're going to be really focused on delivering excellent care to the patients. There's an old quote, right? Patients don't really care how much you know until you know how much they care. And I think that's really at least my North Star in terms of medical education.
Wow, that's incredible. I've never heard that quote, but I like it a lot, and we'll definitely be sharing that more often. Our vision of osmosis is everyone who cares for someone will learn by osmosis. So it's close to our heart, where like phase one of osmosis was the mechanics of care. What is diabetes? What drugs do you use for diabetes? What are the side effects? That's obviously, I think a lot of that stuff AI will help augment and or replace. There's the pure rote knowledge, because that's changing so often, and new evidence-based guidelines are coming out pretty quickly. But the so-called soft skills of care, like how do you empathize with somebody, how do you communicate with them, difficult news, that stuff I think is going to become even more important as AI takes over some maybe the more rote or mechanical aspects of healthcare delivery.
Yeah, well said. At the end of the day, we're humans, and we're caring for humans, and we can't underestimate the agency that we all each have as humans, and what a difference it makes for so many people. So well said.
Totally. And so I want to be respectful of your time. So I only had two other questions for you. The first is, what advice are you, picture it's, summer 2024, and you're giving the convocation for the new class of 97 students. What advice will you give to them about approaching their medical education time as well as their careers in general?
So I've thought about this day, many times, with this inaugural class of OCOM that are coming in, and I'm going to have a lot of wishes for them. Wishes that their career in medicine has been as rewarding as mine has been, and also to make sure that they're doing this for the right reason. That they're doing this to help out other people. One of the purposes of life is to improve the lives of others. And I think if they can find their purpose in medicine, and they can identify with that, everything else will happen. They'll have the energy, the passion to study and learn all these things that we need to know, and build those heuristic or those cognitive shortcut memories that we need to build up. But more important, if that's their mission, to take excellent care of patients, they're going to be incredible physicians. And so that's I guess overall my message. But I'm looking forward to that day. It'll be a good day, Shiv.
I imagine. And thanks for that. And I think when it happens, hopefully it's recorded and then released on your guys' YouTube channel, and so that we can amplify. Okay, last question. Anything else you want us to be able to share with our audience, whether it's about you, your career, medical education, OCOM, anything? Open mic.
Well, thanks again, and first of all, thanks so much for the opportunity to be on here, Shiv, and tell the OCOM story, and also spend some time with you. You're a bit of a celebrity in medical education circles, and especially with the work that you've done. But yeah, I just want to say thanks for the opportunity to get the word out about what we're doing here. I think that OCOM is going to be medical school like no other. This is a organization. This is a culture. This is a place that we care very, very deeply about, and we love what we're doing and what we're going to do, and the differences that we're going to make. It's going to change healthcare for generations to come. So thank you so much for the welcome, and being part of the community, and being able to to engage with you and your audience, and I wish you the best as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hasty. And with that, I mean, I really like to thank you for taking the time to be with us on this podcast, but also it's personal for me because, as I said, my parents are Central Floridians, and they may be taken care of by some of the students you're training. You'll be training and graduating many of them. So appreciate the work that you and your team are doing, and it's been an honor of mine to be able to speak with you as someone who's doing a hat trick and starting his third med school at this point.
And by the way, Shiv, next time you're in town, I have an open invitation for you and your parents to come over. I really want to show you what we're doing here. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Would love that. Maybe I'll even do an away elective or something, a rotation if possible. So with that, Dr. Hasty, thanks again for taking the time. And to our audience, thank you for checking out today's show. Remember to do your part to raise the line and strengthen our healthcare system. We're all in this together. Take care.
If you like this podcast, please share it on your social channels. You can also subscribe to the series and check out all of our episodes at osmosis.org/raisethelines podcast.